If you're not getting engagement from decision makers, it's not because they're not watching you. It's because your content doesn't make them stop and think. In this video, I'm going to show you the number one mistake that's keeping your content invisible to senior decision makers and what you can do to start standing out without feeling clickbaity or controversial just for the sake of it. Point number one, most thought leaders post safe content instead of thought-provoking content. Now, I know that this comes from a lot of our corporate background, right? You're used to being told by HR teams what you can and can't say and having to toe the company line. However, most of you that I'm talking to have already made that leap from employed to self-employed, and you're now running your own business. There is a worry that you might offend your audience, your target audience, by not playing by the same rules as you used to. What I'm here to say is that's how you differentiate the people you want to work with from the people you don't. You're no longer aimed at a whole industry. You're aimed at the specific people who you align with. Playing it safe means blending in, not standing out. So most consultants, speakers, experts kind of share content that makes them feel comfortable. But comfortable content is also easily forgettable. And the problem stems from the fact that you just, a lot of the time, regurgitating advice that everybody already knows. You know, decision makers aren't looking for 5 tips to be more productive. They're looking for things that have never even occurred to them before. Things that they didn't know were a problem. That's how you catch their attention. So, for example, if you're a leadership coach and you're just reposting like those generic motivational quotes by the influencers that you've seen before, why don't you try thinking about things like breaking down why certain leadership advice is outdated and offering some advice as to what they should do instead? Be honest. Are you posting content that challenges how people think or just what you assume is safe? I've done it. I know for a fact I've done it. I try and stay away from it now. It still creeps back in now and again. We're all human. But my advice to you is if you're worried about this, is just go back and have a look at your last 5 posts. If you have 5, awkward. And just ask, are they opinion driven or do they actually offer some information that's new? Think about it for your posts going forward. Point number 2, why being polarizing, and I'm going to caveat this in the right way, attracts engagement, right? We're not out there to cause arguments. We're not out there to alienate people. But by offering a strong opinion that creates conversation that is strategic, I'm going to caveat again, I'm going to caveat with strategic, not just wanton, reckless, polarizing content, then you start to create conversation with people who are decision makers who want clarity rather than those that are sitting on the fence. They want to know who they're working with. And by alienating some people, which you might do by saying that the thing that they hold dearest and nearest to their heart is wrong. You might do that. It's not intentional. But maybe they're the people you don't want to work with because they don't really believe in the sort of things that you believe in. Therefore, they're a bad fit client and would walk away at some point anyway. But by being clear about the things that we absolutely do believe in, that most people would assume was right, then maybe we create the conversations that lead to more business for us. And that's where we differentiate ourselves. So, example, right? AI is changing leadership, right? Okay. But what if you instead rephrase that as something like, AI will replace bad leaders, but great leadership will never be automated. It's still, even to that extent, I see people doing that a lot. There's not many people can back that up with real credible experience. And if you're one of the people that can, you say that and then dive into why you know that's the case. Then that separates you from those people who are just saying those things. So the point of that is it just sparks a discussion instead of just restating something fairly obvious. Think about a time when you kind of disagreed with what somebody else said or thought, and like, did you back away from that? Or did you go in and engage and put your point across? Taking a stand creates conversation. And we should all try now and again to create that standing point where we know some people are going to disagree with us, but it kind of separates the wolf from the sheep for you, for your audience, right? Where do I start carving out who my ideal audience are? Point 3 is really exciting for me just now based on a conversation I've had today, and I'm going to divulge a little bit more at the end, but the power of storytelling over just sharing tips. So there's 2 types of conversations. As somebody who records a lot of video with my clients, I see this a lot. You've got informal edit. You've got informative videos where it's somebody talking to camera and it kind of feels like you're being taught something. I know these things, I'm going to teach you them, and I'm going to run through them one at a time, and I'm going to tell you that they're right. As opposed to somebody who has a much less formal approach, who approaches the video like a conversation and shares their experience, shares some examples of where they've seen these things happen, and then structures it in a way that helps bring it to life in your mind. So what's the problem? What was at stake? How was that solved? What was the lesson that we learned through doing this? All those sorts of things. And I'm not a master storyteller, and this is why I'm excited about this, because I'm actually teaming up with a master storyteller in the not too distant future. Watch this space. I will be recording and releasing a webinar with Antonia Byte. She's a master storyteller. She comes from the film and movie industry. She's going to share with us some examples of how to do that with my content. Right? She's going to take my content apart and turn it into advice for me. Live, kind of live, it would be pre-recorded, but it will be in the moment. I won't have heard the advice before. You're going to see me get absolutely destroyed, but it's all for the good, because even I can get better at what I do. Storytelling is such a big key to unlocking your ideal audience. So things like just coming out with things like 3 ways to overcome imposter syndrome, right? Tell the story of a client who almost walked away from big opportunity because of imposter syndrome, and what changed for them. How did that client overcome their imposter syndrome? What symptoms did they show? How did they feel afterwards? And just really talking through it all. And honestly, I can take some of this advice myself, right? Like, it's easier to talk about than it is to do in practice. We should be aiming for it. Point number 4, how to frame content for senior leaders versus mid-level audiences. Now, I see this a lot because for a lot of senior consultants who I work with, their peers, when they're in the workplace doing their delivery for a client, will be very different from the people who say yes to the budget. And so you've got to have a mix of content, right? You've got to be able to talk to those mid-level managers who you're going to be working directly with and influencing, mentoring, leading, all those sorts of things, because you want them on board. But ultimately, they're not the ones that sign off your budget. So you also need to have a stream of content that talks to their leadership. And I'd argue that should be the bigger focus for most people. So you want to have 2 tracks of content, but most people only ever talk to these people here. And whilst I understand why that is, you're missing the picture, because these guys are the ones you need to impress, and you need to talk on a very different level, very different jargon, very different way of communicating when you're talking to that much more senior leadership. Things like, if you're writing copy, it might move from how to write better sales pitches to why your sales pitch is losing you business and what you can fix about that. So it takes them on that journey from just generic content to what's in it for me. You want to move away from creating how-to guides to strategic pieces that showcase that you're an authority, that you're credible in the industry. And again, the people who are looking for how-to guides are your peers. People who are looking for strategy and advice on strategy and direction, they're the directors, the people that sign off your budget. Point 5, like the importance of posting consistently, even if you're not seeing immediate results. The fact of the matter is that if you're lucky, 1 in 10 of your posts will be seen by your ideal audience. 1 in. So you've got to create 10 pieces of content to be seen by everyone in your ideal audience is the theory, right? Like, it doesn't work like that in real life, but a lot of people, and it goes for many forms of content creation, most people quit before they see results because they just don't get instant reactions from the people who they want to influence. They think it's not working for them. Believe me, your audience is watching, even if they're not commenting. There's 2 things to note with this, right? 1, you need to try and engage them in the comments. So your call to action, how you write the post, your storytelling abilities, you can get them to comment. They're unlikely to, especially if they're in a bigger business, because they don't want to admit publicly that they have problems that you might be solving. Mostly because they don't want the embarrassment. They've got their ego to think about, their job, their security, all those sorts of things. But also because they don't want to be pitched to. And they know that comes on the back of engaging with somebody's post. So they will lurk, they will watch, But the more times you show up in their feed, the mere recency effect makes you feel like an expert to them. Just for the fact that you're there all the time. Like, they start to see you as an expert. Consistency equals familiarity. And eventually familiarity equals trust. So combine being there consistently in their feed with adding value every time they see you, and all of a sudden you're the only person that can solve their problems and nobody else exists. Budget is what it is, but ultimately you don't have any competitors for price. It's not a race to the bottom. You have a niche. They need you, and you're the only person that can solve their problems. So the way I think about posting, it's kind of like compound interest, like social capital, right? Like you're putting money into a savings account, and over time, to start with, that's not very much. It's not going to feel like it's having an impact. Over time, it absolutely does, and it will come back and in spades eventually. You've just got to learn the ropes, figure out how to do it, be consistent, and know that the results will come. But here's what I'd say is, if after 90 days, your content isn't attracting the right sort of opportunities, it's not attracting the right sort of people, the right sort of decision makers, the purpose of today's content, today's newsletter is perhaps you're playing it too safe. Maybe you just need to be a bit more provocative, a bit more polarizing, share some of your opinions that as an expert you're entitled to have. Imposter syndrome means you'll feel like you shouldn't, but you absolutely should. Get off the fence and help them get off the fence. Be a bit more provocative. And if you want help with that, if you want to know how to make your content more engaging, more polarizing, more opinionated, drop me a DM or an email. You know where I'm at. Take care, and I'll see you next week.